The morning I left my husband, I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream or throw things. I didn't even allow myself the dignity of one last angry outburst. I simply packed my car, buckled my daughter into her booster seat, and drove away. From the house that was supposed to be our forever home, knowing with a hollow certainty that I would never go back. People imagine these moments as loud, messy explosions. They picture shattered glass, angry shouts echoing through hallways, neighbors sneaking peeks through blinds while whispering to each other. But in reality, it was quiet, almost eerily so. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards as I carried one bag after another down the stairs. My daughter's little voice humming the theme song from her favorite cartoon, completely unaware that her whole world was about to change. Even my own body felt strangely calm. No dramatic shaking hands, no hyperventilating sobs. Just a heavy stillness inside me. Like my soul had already made this decision months ago, and my body was only now catching up. It didn't look like courage. It looked like 2 suitcases in the trunk of a second-hand Toyota Corolla and a GPS set to my parents' address. It looked like grabbing a Ziploc bag of snacks for the road because I knew my daughter would get hungry halfway there. It looked like slipping my wedding ring off my finger and tucking it into the glove compartment, as though hiding it could also hide the years of my life I had given away. But make no mistake, it took every ounce of courage I had to turn that key in the ignition. Because walking away from a marriage isn't just about leaving a person, it's leaving an entire version of yourself behind. The version that believed in promises, whispered late at night. The version that thought love alone could keep a house from crumbling. The version that bent and broke herself trying to fix something that wasn't hers to fix. I'd stayed longer than I should have. I'd convinced myself things would get better. That if I just worked harder, cooked his favorite meals, stayed quiet during his moods, supported every late night at the office, the man I'd fallen in love with would eventually come back. I had made excuses for his distance, ignored the sharp edges of his temper, and carried the weight of both of us until I was too tired to stand. But that morning, staring at the chipped paint of our front door, I knew he wasn't coming back, and if I stayed, I was going to lose myself completely. So I did the scariest, bravest, and most necessary thing I've ever done in my life. I drove away. No dramatic goodbyes, no tears soaking my cheeks, just the quiet hum of the engine, the sound of tires on asphalt, and the faint echo of my daughter singing in the backseat. That was the day I finally walked away from my marriage. When people ask how Daniel and I met, I always wish I could give them some simple story, like we locked eyes across a crowded room and just knew. But the truth is, it was much more ordinary than that. We met in the most cliché way possible, at a college party. I was a sophomore studying psychology, and my roommate dragged me to this off-campus house that smelled like beer and old carpet. I was standing awkwardly in the kitchen, holding a red plastic cup I had no intention of drinking from, when Daniel walked in. He was a senior in business administration, already wearing that confident, polished look of someone who had plans much bigger than college life. He had a presence about him, shoulders back, smile easy, like every room bent toward him without him trying. He asked me if I wanted to play beer pong. I laughed and told him I was terrible at it. He grinned and said, "Perfect, I'll carry us." And somehow, through a blur of missed shots and playful teasing, I felt myself drawn in. We started dating a few weeks later. What I remember most about those early days wasn't anything grand. It was the little routines we created. Meeting at the campus coffee shop between classes, sharing fries at midnight from the only diner open past 2 a.m., studying side by side in the library, our feet brushing under the table. He made me feel safe, seen, and if I'm being honest, a little in awe. I'd grown up in a working-class family in Ohio, where my parents spent late nights at the kitchen table arguing about bills, sometimes sliding envelopes of overdue notices back and forth. I promised myself I'd build a different kind of life, one where I didn't constantly have to choose between groceries and gas. When Daniel talked about his big plans, management, maybe his own company someday, it felt like he was handing me a ticket out of all that uncertainty. We dated for 3 years, and when he proposed at a little Italian restaurant the week after my graduation, I cried so hard the waiter had to bring me extra napkins. Daniel leaned across the table, kissed my hand, and whispered, "We'll build a beautiful life together, you'll see." I believed him with everything in me. Our wedding was small but perfect. My dress wasn't expensive. It came from a clearance rack, but I didn't care. All I saw was him, waiting at the end of the aisle. We honeymooned in Florida, came back sunburned and broke, but happier than ever. We moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment, furnished mostly with hand-me-downs. Our couch had a spring that poked you if you sat in the wrong spot, and our bed squeaked every time one of us rolled over. But I thought it was all part of the adventure. The first couple of years were hard, but in the kind of way that felt normal. We ate ramen noodles more nights than I cared to admit, clipped coupons from the Sunday paper, and celebrated fancy nights by splitting a $5 pizza and watching Netflix on his old laptop. When rent was due, we both held our breath until paychecks cleared. But I wasn't scared. We had each other, and that made me feel invincible. 2 years later, I found out I was pregnant. I'll never forget the way Daniel reacted. I came out of the bathroom holding the little stick, my hands shaking. He looked at it, then at me, and his whole face lit up. He picked me up, spun me around, and kissed my stomach like we were already parents. "You'll never have to worry about anything," he promised. And for a while, that felt true. Pregnancy wasn't easy. I had morning sickness that lasted all day, swollen ankles, and endless cravings for pickles at midnight. But Daniel was attentive back then. He'd run to the store at 2 a.m. just because I wanted chocolate milk. He built the crib himself, even though it wobbled a little when he was done. He held my hand through labor, tears streaming down his face when our daughter finally let out that first cry. Those early months with a baby were the hardest and the sweetest. We took turns staying up at night, though Daniel often worked long hours. So more often than not, it was me pacing the apartment at 3 a.m. with a crying newborn on my shoulder. But when he was home, he was present. He'd sit on the floor making silly faces just to see her laugh or sing her lullabies in a voice so off-key it made me giggle through my exhaustion. For a little while, I thought we were the family I'd always dreamed of becoming. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, Daniel carrying our daughter on his shoulders. Sunday afternoons at the park, pushing her in the baby swing. Wednesday nights eating spaghetti in front of the TV because we were too tired for anything else. It was ordinary, and yet it was everything. I told myself, this is what I'd been waiting for. The stability, the safety, the love. We had a rhythm, a home filled with laughter and baby toys scattered across the floor. Even when money was tight, even when we argued about small things like dishes left in the sink, I still believed we were building something lasting. But looking back, I can see the signs were there. The small cracks that I ignored because I wanted so badly to believe we were unbreakable. The way Daniel sometimes shut down when I brought up money. The way his smile faded quicker than it used to. The way he pulled out his phone at dinner more often than holding my hand. At the time, though, I brushed it all aside. I told myself every marriage goes through ups and downs, and besides, we were still young. We had time to grow, to figure it all out. I didn't know then that the version of Daniel I had fallen in love with was already slipping away. The first signs that something was shifting came so quietly I almost missed them. At first, it was just Daniel working late. He'd call around 6 p.m. to say he had to stay at the office for a big project, and I'd shrug it off. It made sense. He was ambitious, determined to move up the ladder. I'd put our daughter to bed by myself, eating reheated pasta while watching sitcom reruns, telling myself this was temporary. Just a busy season. Just a phase. But temporary turned into constant. Whole weeks where he only came home to sleep. Our daughter started recognizing the sound of the elevator down the hall, her little face lighting up when she thought it was him. Only to fade again when she realized it was just the neighbor, jingling keys at his door. She stopped asking, "When is Daddy coming home?" And that silence cut even deeper than the questions. Dinner became lonelier. I'd set out 2 plates, then scrape his untouched portion into the trash hours later. I'd linger at the sink, watching dishes soak in suds, the sound of the faucet filling the empty kitchen. Sometimes I'd pretend he was on his way, that any minute he'd walk through the door with a tired smile, loosen his tie, kiss my forehead. But the minutes stretched into hours, and the only thing that came through that door was the dull ache of disappointment. When I finally asked him to at least try to be home 1 night a week, he sighed like I was asking him to quit his job entirely. He said, "Do you want me to provide for this family, or not?" He snapped one night, loosening his tie as he dropped his briefcase on the floor. "Of course I do," I said softly, holding our daughter on my hip. "But she misses you. I miss you. We need you here sometimes too." His expression hardened, his jaw set like stone. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Do you think promotions just fall out of the sky?" I bit my tongue, but the sting of his words lingered long after he disappeared into the shower. Then came the money problems. For all the hours he worked, somehow we were always short. I'd check the bank account before grocery shopping, anxiety knotting my stomach when I saw the balance. I started clipping coupons again, buying generic cereal instead of the brand our daughter liked, skimping on fresh fruit because it cost too much. When I mentioned it to Daniel, he brushed me off. "Relax. I've got it under control," he said, scrolling through his phone without even glancing up. But it didn't feel under control when I was counting quarters at the self-checkout to pay for milk. The arguments grew sharper. Sometimes it was about money, sometimes about his absence, sometimes about nothing at all. He'd call me too emotional, too needy, too dramatic. I'd accuse him of being cold, distant, like a stranger in his own home. The words we hurled at each other bounced off the walls and seemed to live there, poisoning the air we breathed. One night, after he came home past midnight, I confronted him as he slipped off his shoes. "Daniel, I can't keep doing this. I feel like I'm raising our daughter alone." He didn't even look at me. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "I'm not. I need a partner. She needs a father who's actually here." Finally he turned, his face dark with anger. "God, you're exhausting. Do you ever stop complaining?" His words hit me like a slap. I went to bed that night with tears soaking my pillow, my body curled protectively around our sleeping daughter, wondering when we had become enemies instead of teammates. The distance between us widened in ways that weren't always visible, but I felt it in every interaction. The silence at dinner, the way he scrolled on his phone instead of asking about my day, the absence of simple gestures, no hand on my back when I washed dishes, no goodnight kiss, no warmth. Just a coldness that grew and grew until it seeped into the very bones of our home. The breaking point came on a random Tuesday night. I was folding laundry in the living room, mindlessly pairing socks, when Daniel's phone buzzed on the coffee table. Normally, I never touched it. I wasn't the snooping type, but something about the way the screen lit up made me glance over. A message preview glowed against the dark. Can't stop thinking about last night. Same time tomorrow? My blood ran cold. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. The passcode wasn't hard, our wedding date. The irony of that nearly choked me as the screen unlocked. There it was. Weeks of messages. Flirty, explicit, unmistakable. Her name was Claire. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might pass out. I scrolled through photo attachments I didn't want to see, my stomach lurching with every line of text. The man I had built my life around, the father of my child, had been living a double life right under my nose. I sat there in silence, the room spinning around me. The laundry sat forgotten in my lap. I could hear the faint hum of the dryer, the tick of the clock, the sound of my daughter's gentle breathing from the next room. Life carried on as usual, while my world cracked apart in my hands. When I heard the front door open an hour later, I nearly dropped the phone. He walked in, loosened his tie, and asked casually, "What's for dinner?" I laughed, a sharp, broken sound I didn't even recognize as my own. He frowned. "What?" I held up the phone. "Who is Claire?" The color drained from his face. He stepped forward, reaching for the device, but I pulled back, clutching it like a weapon. "Don't you dare lie to me," I said, my voice shaking. He sat down heavily on the couch, rubbed his temples, and sighed. "Not guilty. Not apologetic. Just irritated. It's nothing serious," he muttered. "Just a distraction." "A distraction?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've been sneaking around behind my back and that's all you have to say?" "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he shot back. The same excuse as always. "I needed an outlet." "An outlet?" My voice cracked. "We're your family, Daniel. We're supposed to be enough." For hours, we yelled. I cried until my throat was raw. He deflected, minimized, blamed me. "You've changed," he spat at one point. "You're so wrapped up in the kid, you don't even care about me anymore. You let yourself go. You're boring." Claire makes me feel alive again. The words cut so deep I physically staggered. I remember gripping the back of the chair just to steady myself. I whispered, "After everything I've given up for us, this is what you think of me?" He shrugged, stone-faced. No remorse. No flicker of the man I once knew. And then came the lowest blow. "If you leave, you'll never make it on your own. You don't even have a job. You'll come crawling back." Those words seared into me like fire. They weren't just insults. They were predictions, warnings meant to trap me, to keep me small, to convince me I was nothing without him. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while he slept soundly beside me, as if he hadn't just shattered our entire life. I could feel the heat of his body inches away, but he had never felt farther. I realized then I wasn't just hurt. I was done. The trust was gone. The love buried under betrayal and contempt. What remained was survival. And deep down, I knew he was wrong about me. I could make it on my own. I just had to find the courage to prove it. It's been 2 years since the morning I packed up my car and drove away from that house. 2 years since I felt the weight of a door closing behind me and knew, deep in my bones, that it was the right choice, even though it was the hardest one I'd ever made. The months that followed were brutal. There's no sugarcoating that. Divorce isn't just a legal process, it's an unraveling. Every shared bill, every piece of furniture, every holiday plan had to be split down the middle, dissected, fought over. What once felt like a life built together suddenly became a list of assets to divide, memories reduced to numbers on paper. Daniel didn't make it easy. He used the same tactics he always had: gaslighting, intimidation, trying to make me doubt myself. He told anyone who would listen that I was overdramatic, unstable, ungrateful. At first, those old doubts crept in. The voice in my head whispered, "What if he's right? What if I am difficult? What if I am too much?" But the difference was, I didn't believe him anymore. I had my parents' support, a job that gave me independence, and a daughter who needed me steady more than she needed me perfect. I had proof, tangible, undeniable, that I could survive without him. The custody battle was the hardest part. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to lawyers pick apart my parenting, listening to Daniel paint himself as the devoted father he hadn't been in years. It was gut-wrenching. My hands shook under the table, my throat ached from swallowing tears. But I kept reminding myself, this wasn't about winning or losing against him. It was about creating the best possible life for our daughter. In the end, we landed on joint custody. It wasn't ideal. I wanted full custody, if I'm honest. But it gave her stability. And when she's with me, I make sure she knows she is loved beyond measure. Building a new life was messy and imperfect. I rented a small 2-bedroom apartment above a bakery. The smell of fresh bread wafted up through my windows every morning, and somehow that scent felt like a promise of a fresh start. The furniture was mostly secondhand, but I made it ours, painting walls soft colors, hanging my daughter's artwork in cheap frames, adding thrift store blankets to make it cozy. Our home didn't look like much from the outside, but inside it pulsed with warmth, laughter, and resilience. There were nights I sat at the kitchen table with bills spread out, tears dripping onto overdue notices as I tried to stretch every dollar. Nights where the weight of responsibility pressed down so heavy I could hardly breathe. But there were also nights when my daughter and I danced in that tiny living room, spinning in circles to silly songs, laughing until our sides hurt, collapsing on the couch in a heap of joy. Those nights reminded me that happiness wasn't gone. It had just changed shape. I learned things I never thought I'd need to. How to fix a leaky faucet with a YouTube tutorial. How to carry groceries and a wriggling child up 3 flights of stairs in one trip. How to look a landlord in the eye and negotiate repairs. How to find joy in the simple things, like Saturday morning pancakes or bedtime stories whispered under twinkle lights strung across her room. And slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt myself. I started therapy, where I unpacked not just the betrayal, but the years of silence and shrinking myself to fit Daniel's needs. I realized how much of me had been buried under his criticisms, how much of my worth I had handed over to his approval. Therapy was like holding up a mirror I had avoided for years, painful, but necessary. One day in therapy, my counselor asked me, "When was the last time you felt truly proud of yourself?" I thought about it, combing through years of memories. And then it hit me. The proudest moment of my life wasn't graduating college or even giving birth. It was the morning I walked out that door. Because that was the day I chose myself. That was the day I proved to myself that I was stronger than his words, stronger than his doubt, stronger than the fear of being alone. Daniel is still in our lives, at least partially. He sees our daughter on weekends. Sometimes we sit across from each other at school events, polite but distant, like two strangers with a shared responsibility. I don't hate him anymore. Hatred would still give him power. Instead, I feel nothing. And that, I've learned, is freedom. My daughter is thriving. She's 7 now, curious and bright, full of sass and laughter. She loves reading books out loud, making up dance routines in the living room, and asking endless questions about the world. She sometimes asks why mommy and daddy don't live together, and I tell her the truth in the simplest way. Because sometimes grown-ups can't make each other happy anymore. But we both love you very much, and she accepts that. Because children don't need perfect parents, they just need present ones. As for me, I'm not the same woman who once stood at an altar believing in forever. I'm not the woman who begged for scraps of attention or forgave unforgivable things. I'm someone new, stronger, wiser, softer in some ways, sharper in others. Walking away from my marriage was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was also the bravest. Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't holding on, it's letting go. If you're listening to this and you feel trapped, if you've been told you're too weak to stand on your own, let my story be proof. You are stronger than you think. You deserve a life where you don't have to beg for love, where peace isn't a luxury, where your heart feels safe in your own home. I lost a marriage, but I found myself. And that, I've realized, is the most important love story of all. Because in the end, love isn't just about finding someone else to hold on to. It's about learning to hold on to yourself. So if you're listening to this right now and you feel trapped, if you've been made to believe that silence is strength, or that endurance is the same as love, please hear me. You are not weak for wanting peace. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. And you are not alone. The bravest thing I ever did was turn the key in that ignition and drive toward the unknown. And maybe, just maybe, the bravest thing you'll ever do is take your first step too. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please like and subscribe for more real-life stories. Because sometimes, the stories we tell are the proof someone else needs to finally set themselves free. And if you think my story was intense, wait until you hear the next one. A woman who discovered the person she trusted most was living a double life right under her roof.